Good evening. I am Bully, and tonight I have gathered everything you knew about the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop game, goth interactive immersive theater, and a high-stakes fashion show to bring you Laws of the Night. As always, for my reviews, I don't give it a rating or say if it's good or bad or whatever. I'm going to tell you what the book is, what the book's intention is, and if it accomplishes that intention. Then we'll do a deep dive. Simple. So let's do it. First, what is the book? This book. Well, in this case, books. These books. They're the same. Well, pretty much the same. There's a little pocket size if you got big old pockets, or a travel book because you do LARPing out and about. And a big boy book if you like pictures and want a big boy book. It's the official LARP book for Vampire the Masquerade, or live action role play if you're fancy. A little background just so you don't get confused, as I initially was a little confused because there's a lot of brands that are involved in putting this together. We have Paradox, right? That's who owns the World of Darkness IP. Part of that, duh. Then it says Mind's Eye Theater Vampire the Masquerade, because Mind's Eye Theater is the group that developed the LARP system. And By Night Studios is the official license holder for this LARP system. They also run LARP events like Darkness Emergent, and sell a bunch of other cool VTM merch.
Let's tell the vampire story.
That's unsettling more than
You're
one thing.
unsettling.
And they'll also be making more LARP books. So this is the main one, the core book, the one you're going to need to play the game. And then, actually at the time of this recording, is currently a campaign on BackerKit for them to make Enemies of the Night and Laws of the Reckoning. Laws of the Reckoning, it'll be the Hunter LARP book, which can be used with your vampire games or just for dedicated hunter games. And Enemies of the Night is an expansion on Laws of the Night that'll introduce more disciplines, more lore sheets, some antagonists and NPCs and things of that nature. And if you're new to LARP or Vampire LARP, there's other Vampire LARPs that use what's called the Nordic system. That's sort of a very rules light style of LARPing that a lot of games use, but this is the one that reflects the tabletop the most, and this is also the official one. So this book covers everything you need to know to play the LARP, and also if you aren't familiar with the tabletop, like this can be if you just are a Vampire the Masquerade LARPer, which there are many who do that, this covers the whole updated setting, lore, all of that stuff. This is all encompassing. For Storyteller, this is a book you're going to need to run the game. For player, this is a book you're going to need to make your characters and learn the rules and things of that nature. It's all there. There are 2 editions of it. It's a hardcover, which includes art, and it's more of a what you would expect in a core book as far as its quality, size, and sort of layout. And then, because LARPing's done out and about, they got a little soft cover version. This is condensed in a way that doesn't have art and things like that in it. This is just supposed to be used for easy references when you're playing your game. And therefore, the book's pretty cool because it's all actual photographs of real people in LARP attire. They kind of get you in that mood and be true to what this game is. So that's what the book is. What's the intention of the book? Well, it's the core book, so it's kind of a weird question, I guess, to ask for the core book, but still, they got a little blurb. They'll read straight from the book. It says their intention, I guess, for design-wise. It says, our chief design goal is to make a simple and fast system of mechanics to allow your character actions to flow quickly into the story. There are core tenets of their design philosophy were speed, simplicity, versatility. So while there are obviously a lot of other Vampire the Masquerade books out there, a lot of the lore and things like that obviously can be used for inspiration, and I guess all sort of lives in the same pseudo canon, though character options might not be as robust, as there's so many in the tabletop games, and a lot of them probably don't really fit into a LARP setting, but all essentially the same setting, more or less. The idea is this is the only book you need if you want to do the LARP, though. You don't need to be familiar with the tabletop or have all the other books to play the LARP. Now, the idea is it's very easy to go from one to the other. It's very easy to convert your tabletop character into a LARP character, or vice versa. While all the settings and lore and things like that are going to be very familiar, the rules are obviously different. The mechanics are a lot more streamlined. There's not necessarily dice pools because they're not rolling dice in a LARP. It's a lot of negotiations or just comparing your stats, and a lot of just little rock, paper, scissors, or Rochambeau if you're cultured. They also specifically talk about changes they've made. If you're familiar with Mind's Eye Theater LARP system from the older edition of Vampire, they explain some of the things that have changed from that version to this version. I never played that version, so I can't speak to those changes as much, but what I read about them make a lot of sense to me. A big change seems to be with the background specifically, which I guess before were like sort of this, what was the words, like a complex mini game played out on spreadsheets. Now, say a collaborative tool to use with storytellers to sort of manage your downtime activities or flesh out NPCs. So does it accomplish what it sets out to do? Yeah, absolutely. It's the LARP book. It's got the rules. And as far as, I guess, accomplishing their design goals, I think they do that. Now, if we're comparing it, I've done a Nordic LARP. So if we're comparing it to that, this isn't going to feel as the speed, simplicity. But if you're comparing it to the tabletop, this is a conversion of for the LARP, then yes, you're definitely getting a speedier, simple, much simpler mechanics to work with. And as far as a standalone book, as far as introducing someone who might be brand new to the world of darkness, of Vampire the Masquerade setting and lore and all of that, I think it absolutely accomplishes that too. Again, there's a lot of information out there. So if you're comparing it directly to the tabletop with all of its books released, there's less. But if you're comparing it corebook to corebook, I think it does a great job of really getting you everything you need to know to understand the setting and the world and how to make a character for it. And this is primarily a rule book, I would say. Again, gives you all the information you need to understand the setting, but the point of it is more to give you everything you need to run a LARP. And they do a great job with the layout design for that reason. And this is something that's pretty clearly laid out. When we get through the chapters, you'll see that the rules are easy to find. If you're someone learning or you have your soft cover with you when you're out in the field or salon or dungeon, wherever you happen to be playing, it's going to be pretty easy to find what you need. Also, the PDF. There's a PDF version. So if you have this on a tablet or something, the PDF's set up in a way to where it's easy to, there's a lot of links and stuff to easily jump around and find terms, which I really appreciate that they set it up that way. From a player standpoint, I think it definitely accomplishes what it needs to as far as giving you the information you need and letting you understand how to make a character. Not only do they mechanically teach you how to make a character, they have some interesting sort of questions to ask and ask for your character building and ask yourself of the type of character you're wanting to play in a LARP, because I think the process is a little different, or it should be. For getting this as a storyteller, it gives you everything you need to learn the system and run the game. There's even a chapter specifically on like storyteller advice for running a LARP. From what I can tell, running a LARP is an exercise in like event planning and people management and just all sorts of other things that there could be textbooks on how to be good at all of those skills. But this gives you some great advice. A lot of it, you're just gonna have to be brave and figure it out. I couldn't do it, but huge respect to those that can. But also, I'm thinking of like events. This, I think, would come most in handy, not necessarily for planning events as much as planning like a regular LARP, an ongoing LARP with a consistent group. And that feels more manageable. So yeah, you could get this book and do that. Okay, now I'm going to do the chapter by chapter dive. Going to do this a little more streamlined than I usually do, which how I usually do it is not streamlined even a little bit. So who knows, this probably isn't either. But I mean, it's mostly a rule book. So for me to like go chapter by chapter, I mostly would just be telling you the rules of the game. And that's not what this video is. So instead, I'll give you a rough overview of what you can expect to find in there, some things that stuck out to me, and maybe mention some things that are unique to the LARP for people who are more used to the tabletop, because, well, I'm someone who's used to the tabletop and new to LARP. So that's my lens, that's my perspective while reading this. So that's what you're going to get mostly. Chapter 1, Introduction. This is where they explain sort of their design philosophy, very broad terms of like what is the world of darkness. There's a section on the settings update, which I think is really good. So people who are LARPers from the old edition, and this is their first introduction to 5th edition is through this LARP, they sort of give you those updates on the lore, as well as updates on like changes they made specifically to the system, mechanics-wise. And a lexicon, which I think is especially useful for a LARP if you're new, because people are going to be using all sorts of weird words that you aren't going to understand. So you got a little reference thing there. Be like, what did this person just call me? Is that bad? Probably, but let me make sure. Then we have chapter 2, the clans. Nice thing about this coming out after a lot of the other tabletop books is all the clans are in here, as well as the Thin Bloods. So you got all of your options here. They cover the disciplines, the archetypes, banes and compulsions for each of them, all the stuff you need, as well as some lore about the clans as well. Chapter 3, character generation and progression. Again, it's right there. If you're making a character, you see the clans. Chapter 2, hey, here's how to make a character. Genius. Some of the other books don't work that way. I will be doing a video specifically on how to create a character in a LARP, so I'll dive into that more in that. What I like about this is their step 1 is also my approach to making a Vampire the Masquerade character, which is, what do they say? It's about building a person. They're figuring out who they were as a human, what they're leaving behind, what happened to lead them into an embrace situation and all of that. Great advice. And then the other steps proceed as you would expect. Pick your clan, assign your generation and blood potency, your attributes, your skills, predator type. And then they get into backgrounds, lore sheets, and merits and flaws, which are probably the biggest difference in character creation when it comes to the tabletop to the LARP. They use a system, that same one that I use, where you can take additional flaws to get more dots in your merits or advantages. And an interesting thing is with the lore sheets, you can only have one, which makes sense for a LARP. So you can't kind of pick your lane, not try to dip your toes into everything. Helps sort of define your character, give you a thing. In a LARP, especially with a lot of people, too much is, well, too much. Then they have their disciplines, their experience points chart, how to spend your XP, and then finishing touches, aka for this, willpower, health, and your initiative score. Chapter 4, core systems. This chapter is covering the rules of the game, all the mechanics. This is a lot less mechanically complex than the tabletop, as it should be, because it's a LARP. But it still has a rule set, and it's still very familiar if you're used to the tabletop. You still have your dice pools, your dots, but obviously instead of rolling them and try comparing your successes and whatnot, you sometimes just compare numbers and things will happen, but most of the time you play rock, paper, scissors. Or if you're feeling really fancy, 1, call Rochambeau. 2, they have these cool like metal cards with a rock, paper, and scissor. I don't know why, but someone let us use them at the Darkness Emergent event and felt good. Pulling out a metal card, I don't know, something about it felt cooler than doing this. And also this can get like people like, is it on shoot? Is it on whatever? Someone delaying? Metal card, flip it and reveal it. Feels good. Feels like a little Yu-Gi-Oh battle in the middle of your confrontation. And that's a feeling we should all be chasing. So yeah, basically for most tests, you rock, paper, scissors. If you win, you win. And then on a tie, that's where your skill pools, your dots come into play. Where dots you have has to exceed the difficulty that the storyteller set, and then you win on a tie. If you meet it or have less, then you lose on a tie. And then if you lose the rock, paper, scissors, then you fail the test. They have a section on combat where first time you LARP, you have to fight physically with your fists. That's not a thing. That'd be wild. And actually, they discourage that, obviously. Well, not fist fighting, but combat in general. LARP is typically best suited for social roleplay. And the book comes right out and says that too, of, hey, it's better to negotiate these type of scenes or sort of act them out. But if you got combat characters and everyone's cool with it and they want to simulate something, here's how to do it. And then there's a section on downtime activities, which for event-based LARPs aren't really a thing because there's not downtime in the middle of your event. But if you have an ongoing campaign, downtime activities seem to be a pretty big part of sort of a LARP chronicle, meaning like what you propose happens between your live LARP and the next one. There's sort of homework you and the storyteller do in the meantime, which it's not really homework. I mean, it's role playing. It's figuring out what you were successful at and whatnot. And a lot of the backgrounds come into play when it comes to downtime activities. Like if you want to feeding and gathering more resources, getting dyscrasias, there's all sorts of stuff you can do. And a lot of the backgrounds directly tie into that. Chapter 5, dramatic systems. So in this chapter, it covers the more vampire specific stuff. Where before was just explaining sort of the system, like the rock, paper, scissors system and the dice pool or your skill pool system. This covers the vampire stuff like rules for the embrace, rouse checks, the hunger system, hunting checks, how blood potency works, blush of life, all of that stuff's covered in this chapter. Chapter 6, background. As I mentioned before, backgrounds are primarily used for downtime activities. So these are for sort of ongoing games you have, your backgrounds will come into play. The backgrounds are interesting, not just for how they apply to the downtime activities, but a lot of them are organized into spheres of influence, which I think are cool. I really like that. And then it adds just a little more customization because a lot of these tie into mortal society. So you pick your sphere of influence in mortal society, usually picking multiple of them per background. Some examples is like church, finance, high society, legal, media, occult, police, street, underworld, academia, things like that. And the backgrounds often have like different levels you can take in them, as well as different merits and flaws specifically attached to those backgrounds. Like this. Lore sheets are also in this chapter. And as I mentioned before, in this system, you can only have one lore sheet. Now you can have multiple levels in that lore sheet, but gotta pick a lane. Chapter 7, merits and flaws. These are similar to backgrounds, where a lot of them connect to the backgrounds. Some don't. And a lot of these are designed to sort of help round out your character and deal with sort of the mortal connections. Chapter 8, powers of the blood. This is the chapter with the disciplines. This is where you'll also see some deviation from the tabletop, not only in the name and which disciplines are offered, but also how they work. Obviously, a lot of things need to be reimagined or reworked to be able to apply to a LARP setting. There's also some in this that I think would be awesome for the tabletop that aren't. So use a little inspiration here. This chapter also gets into how to like signal that how you're using certain discipline types, and some of the basic rules that disciplines follow. And a lot of these deal with different statuses and conditions that aren't in the tabletop but are in this, because it makes more sense for someone to understand how they're supposed to roleplay their character who's suffering from a condition caused from a discipline or something, rather than somehow keep track of like negatives, modifiers, and things of that nature. So some do include that too. Chapter 9, Vampire Society. Again, laid out a nice way where everything you need to make your character and all your rules and how to play the game. And now we're getting into some of the lore and the setting details. This has sections on coteries, territory, the traditions, and different titles, and prestation. The boon system plays a very big part in the LARP. I mean, boons are excellent ways to have interactions with other people, and they're pretty much natural little plot hooks and things of that nature. And they also sort of help tell the story too, of learning who owes what and why these boons came about. And then there's a section on status. This is also something that plays a big deal in the LARP world, in the LARP setting. Again, not as much for event play, but this is something pretty important for ongoing chronicles. In the tabletop, status is background you take dots in, reflects how respected you are among a certain sect. In the LARP setting, it's something that's earned through play and given to you by other characters or NPCs. You give what's called support or opposition, and depending how much status you have, that determines how much support and opposition you can also give out. They're also tied to like monikers, just names you could call people essentially of why you support them, or qualities they have that are attached to why you oppose them, that I think are pretty interesting. These mechanics specifically really make me actually want to do a chronicle, because I guess you could do this as your downtime as well as, you know, people deliver their support and opposition. This sounds like, to me, a fun thing to do in person. It feels like Model UN, but goth, and maybe a little messier. Actually, now that I think about it, Vampire LARP is it more Model UN than a immersive theater? Can be. That's not a bad thing. And I say this as someone who hasn't done Model UN. I come from the woods. My school didn't have these fancy things. But I saw on TV, and I wanted it bad. Are we allowed to do this as adults? I guess that's just politicians. Someone let me know. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Chapter 10, Storyteller Tools. This is a chapter for storytellers. I have a lot of tips and things to consider on running your own LARP. It doesn't get in the weeds too much, but gives some like solid sort of the basic advice to think about, and that you might otherwise not think about, especially if you're used to the tabletop and think, oh, it's just that, but we'll stand around and do it. And talk about how to manage expectations, and how to run a game, and how things work differently as far as like pacing and descriptions and spotlighting characters that might be more difficult or not as obvious, and how to do those in the best way for everyone in a LARP setting. This chapter also has an antagonist section, so we'll have some stats and examples. They have a lot of specific NPCs fleshed out here that you can grab. There's an appendix on equipment, which set rules for different items, likely used in combat scenarios. And then an appendix for structure and size, which just sort of gives little charts for size ratings, things that you'll likely interact with, or some of the other disciplines and things will specify what sort of stuff they can affect, and you'd reference this for that. And that's it. That's Laws of the Night. It's hard to dive in a lot about like my opinions, because this is like the whole game. So I can't really review like the core book. It's really just a review of Vampire the Masquerade LARP. But as far as the book, as far as like layout, amazing, great. So easy to reference, such an improvement over a lot of the tabletop books that you might be used to, especially the earlier ones. And as someone who's new to it, very easy for me to pick up. Well, new to LARP. If you're familiar with the tabletop, I imagine it'll be a very easy adjustment to hop into the official LARP rules. It's hard to judge like how much lore they included in the setting and all of that stuff from someone who's brand new, because I know all this stuff. I got vampire in my brain, so it's hard to say, but I think it's plenty of lore and really well written, an interesting introduction to sort of get you into the mood and understand the worlds you'll be playing in. And of course, with vampire, you can always go on and add all sorts of stuff, but that's also really going to hurt the ease of use of this, which I think is really important for the LARP setting in particular. Like I mentioned, I've used this. I've played Mind's Eye Theater, Vampire the Masquerade, live action role play, but it was in an event setting, so we didn't interact with the mechanics a ton. I did get to, though. Like I said, I got to pull my metal cards, and when I went into that, I didn't really know the rules, and someone was able to explain in seconds of like, oh yeah, just do this. Cool. I did the thing. We figured it out. That's not to say you should go into a LARP not knowing the rules, because it's a crummy thing to do. Learn them, especially these, because they're easy. Now, if you're running an ongoing chronicle, which I imagine is really what the point of this is, not a lot of people are buying core books to run a one-shot, then yeah, this is imperative. You'll interact with the rules in a probably a lot more in-depth way, especially the things like the downtime activities and stuff like that. And the status. There's certain parts of this, like reading this just made me want an actual chronicle now. And as a forever storyteller, that means I would have to do it, and you need skills. You need certain organizational skills, certain level of executive function that I may or may not possess to pull off something like that. Wilder things have happened. But yeah, if you like Vampire the Masquerade, you're going to like this. It's all there. Like I said, setting-wise, lore-wise, nothing's changed. It's all the stuff you like. Just, you gotta get out there to play it. And me, I like getting out there. So, it's a good fit. If you have experience playing in an ongoing chronicle using this, I really want to hear about that. Or running. I really, really want to hear about that, because I really want to know how some of this stuff is in practice, especially the status. Do you do that in person? Please tell me you do that in person. But also, that could take so long if we're all just going around saying, I oppose this person, I support this person. But that's fun too. I don't know. I'm obsessing over this detail for some reason. This is what I want. After reading this, I need a ongoing chronicle, but an annual event, and that's our model United Nations. That's where we need a big room with seats, layers, tiers, if you will, microphones. And I need finger pointing, I need accusations, and I need someone getting it all down. I want it on the record, and I want people demanding things stricken from the record. So make that happen. Someone run an ongoing LARP chronicle for me, and once a year give me a really good model UN where we all update our status. Yeah, that's this. And this is so I've dove into this after playing it, and now I'm really interested to see to use some of these things and interact with some of the mechanics that I now understand better in my next one, now that I know the rules better. So I'll let you know how it goes. But that's it for this. For now, This chapter is closed. Our ritual must end. Thank you for letting me in, but never forget to close the door.
Is anyone still hurt?
No, I didn't take any damage.
There must be some mistake.
I know, right?
I know what those words mean individually, Jasper, but when you put them together in that order, I'm afraid they lose all meaning.
It is a peculiarity, but it's true.
Let's see how long that lasts.